Marc Raimondi for MMAfighting.com here in Viacom headquarters in New York City, along with, how about this, Danny Segura, also from MMAfighting.com. We're here to preview the big Bellator weekend, which highlights the semifinals of the Bellator Heavyweight World Grand Prix. We're going to start on Friday, Bellator 207. It's headlined by a fight between Ryan Bader and Matt Mitrione in the aforementioned semifinals of the Bellator World Grand Prix. Size differential is a big one in this fight, Danny. Mitrione is going as he's a legitimate heavyweight. He's a big heavyweight in some cases, and Bader is, of course, the Bellator light heavyweight champion, former contender in the UFC at light heavyweight. Is the size difference that big of a deal, you think, in this fight?
You know, I think it won't be. I actually got to see Ryan Bader in person when he came in the MMA Hour on Monday, and he's pretty big. He's a big guy. And
compared to you, or?
Yeah, compared to me, of course. He's like,
or compared to most people.
Yeah, he's like 3 times my size. But I mean, I feel like Ryan Bader doesn't carry much fat. It's all muscle. So at the end of the day, sure, Matt Mitrione has more weight on him, but you know, Ryan Bader's still very lean, even at heavyweight. I feel like he's going to come in there, and he might even be the stronger guy, to be honest, especially given his wrestling background. So I don't think it'll play that much of a difference.
Bader feels that in terms of speed and agility, he'll have the advantage over the bigger man Mitrione, but Mitrione actually thinks the opposite, because this is a guy that was in the NFL. He was a former defensive player in the NFL. He is an elite athlete at the highest level. Could Mitrione actually be almost a faster and more agile guy in there?
I mean, we've always talked about Mitrione's how light he is on the feet for a heavyweight, you know, his footwork. So we're clearly going to see a fight between 2 great athletes. But man, when was the last time you saw a heavyweight shoot a double leg? Ryan Bader has that. Well, Ryan Bader will be shooting on him all day, so it's something he's not used to. It's not something that he's going to see. That type of wrestling that Ryan Bader brings, the light heavyweight wrestling, it's definitely something that you know, that Mitrione's not used to. So we're going to see a very athletic contest, but I mean, Matt Mitrione could be more athletic in the speed, but you know, explosiveness, I give it to Ryan Bader.
What are the stakes for Bader here? Because he's the light heavyweight champion. Yeah. This is the heavyweight tournament. If he wins here, he goes to the finals on January 26th at the Forum in Los Angeles. And the light heavyweight belt is still kind of up in the air. What's he going to do? Of course, it kind of sets up probably a busy year for him if he goes on and wins. But what are the stakes here? Is this a defining moment in Bader's career?
It is, because, you know, and he mentioned this at the open workouts, you know, talking to you and other reporters as well. In the UFC, it was hard for him to get a shot just because he wasn't that guy that will go out there on the mic and you know, build a promo and stuff like that. And, you know, given the way his record was in the UFC, you could have made the case that he could have gotten a title shot and nobody would have been mad about it. And who knows, maybe he would have beaten DC. We've seen stranger things happen, right? So this, you know, this is someone that hasn't had the opportunity to, you know, get those big fights, fight for the belt. And here in Bellator, you know, given, you know, the way they run things a bit different from the UFC, he has gotten that opportunity. So this is an opportunity for him to cement himself as one of the best light heavyweights out there. And look, if he becomes a champ, that's something. And today in Bellator, and I mentioned this on the MMA Beat, you know, you can make the case that the welterweight champion is better than the UFC's welterweight champion. Same thing goes at middleweight. So holding a belt in Bellator does mean something. Holding 2, you know, even bigger than that.
Same thing for Mitrione. A win over Ryan Bader, who is a champion in Bellator, would be a big deal. And then if he wins, he goes on to face 2 potential interesting matchups. Yeah. One against Chael Sonnen, which Mitrione said this week that he would love to verbally spar with Sonnen in the press conference, which would be fun. And then possibly a rematch with Fedor Emelianenko, which could be interesting because he won by knockout the first time. It would be Fedor's chance to get revenge, and 2 wins over Fedor would be huge for Mitrione. What is at stake for Mitrione, and could this be something that also shapes his post-UFC and even his entire MMA career?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's very similar to the Bader spot. You know, this is a guy that never really got that shot, and here he has that opportunity. And again, holding a Bellator belt means something. And you know, he's doing it off the back of legends. You know, beating Fedor twice. You know, not that many people have done that. So it definitely adds to his career. And you know, his UFC run was great, and it sort of felt like, I don't know, to me it felt like we didn't see the best of Mitrione, and I feel like here in Bellator he really is coming into his own, and we've seen a different fighter, a more mature fighter, really. So yeah, this legitimizes in the heavyweight division. And look at the heavyweight rankings in the UFC. You wouldn't tell me that, you know, Matt Mitrione couldn't hang with the top 5, you know, top 10. He's definitely a top 10 heavyweight in the UFC. So, you know, he's legitimate, and this legitimizes his career even more.
A guy that has gotten better even though he's advanced in age, because he got a late start. He was playing football for his athletic prime, you would say, and he's gotten
usually
better.
That's the story with the heavyweights, right? Like these guys come into their prime way later. We saw Fabricio Werdum getting close to 40 and really coming into his own, and as well as other guys as well. So I can just expect him to become even better in the next few years.
So Fedor versus Mitrione, of course, headlines Bellator 207, which is on Friday night at Mohegan Sun. On Saturday night, the Bellator 208 card is about 150 miles south and east on Long Island at Nassau Coliseum, and that card is headlined by another heavyweight Grand Prix semifinal fight between Chael Sonnen and Fedor Emelianenko, which it's still weird to me putting those two names together versus one another, because Sonnen is a guy who spends almost his entire career fighting in middleweight, and Fedor Emelianenko is regarded by many as one of the best heavyweights, if not the best heavyweight of all time. Is it weird seeing Chael versus Fedor on the banner?
It is extremely bizarre, and with some fights, you can kind of play out in your head, Khabib McGregor, we saw it last week, and you can kind of see how that would play out, right? And you imagine different scenarios. With this one, I just can't even imagine them seeing both in the same cage. It's just very, very odd to me. So I don't know how that one's going to go out. I'm actually very, very intrigued by that one.
Chael Sonnen said at the open workouts this week that he's never faced anyone who has that kind of intimidating, that was the adjective he put on it, the intimidating power that Fedor has. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's accurate? Because he is moving up in weight, and I mean he's moving up 2 divisions essentially.
Yeah. Look, Fedor, I saw him on the MMA Hour, and I just shook his hand and said, "What's up?" And I'm not even fighting the guy, and I got scared. He's got this stare, this. He's still got it, man. Fedor, and this is something interesting about this fight. This is not a Legends fight. This is not Tito Ortiz fighting Chuck Liddell. These guys are still, I would say both of them are past their prime, but they're not to a point that they're not relevant. They are fighting. I mean, the winner here could go on to fight for the belt, in Bellator. So this is an interesting fight. But yeah, Fedor's a scary guy, and he's still got it. Matt Mitrione, who we just talked about him being a legit heavyweight, not only that, but even getting better. He got dropped by Fedor. So Fedor still got it. People are saying he's washed up, and sure, he's not in his prime, but man, he's a dangerous guy that you got to take very, very seriously.
Part of Chael Sonnen's game has always been the mental warfare, and we've talked a lot about mental warfare over the last few weeks with the aforementioned Conor versus Khabib fight. Doesn't seem like Fedor is playing this game right now. Does not, even less so than I would say Khabib did last week. Will that be a factor at all? Will Chael Sonnen's talk before this fight mean anything?
I mean, if he wins, obviously looking back at all the trash-talking clips and him calling his shots and whatnot, it's going to look better on him. But I don't think this is going to have any influence on the fight. And I feel like, in a way, kind of Chael got that vibe a little bit, because at the open workouts, he wasn't really trying to cut out a promo out there. He was just saying, look, I respect the guy, and he was actually more complimentary of Fedor. So he knows trying to play mind games with that guy is going to be impossible.
For Fedor, this is kind of his second coming in some ways, because he had that retirement that he was out for a little bit. To come back and win the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix, first he has to get by Sonnen, and then he'll face the winner, of course, of Bader versus Mitrione. Would that cement him as the best heavyweight of all time, do you think, if you don't think he is already?
I think it makes him a really strong case, and I think Mitrione touched on this, at the open workouts. He said what makes fighters great is when they transcend generations. GSP beat the old guys, beat the guys of his age and the future guys. Fedor's still fighting the top guys. So I think it would, and more importantly, I don't think that is as important, the conversation of the GOAT, but what a way to clean up the career, man, because for at one point in time, he fought Fabio Maldonado, a guy who was a UFC light heavyweight. You could make a case he's a middleweight, and got, pieced up, and he looked pretty dark, and now, he's got a knockout win over Frank Mir. Imagine if he beats Chael, imagine if he beats Mitrione or Bader. What a way to clean up the career. So I think he's sort of finishing on a good note if he does get the belt. And, he's got an amazing career. So
Chael Sonnen beat Rampage Jackson in the first round, a heavyweight Rampage Jackson, and he has a chance to beat Fedor Emelianenko in this round and move on to the finals. For him, what does all this mean? Because he's a guy that he's kind of always the bridesmaid, never the bride type of guy in the UFC, where he fought for the middleweight title twice in the UFC, he fought for the light heavyweight title once and lost to John Jones. A win over Fedor, is that a big one for his legacy, do you think? Or does legacy for a guy like Chael not even really matter that much because he's so entertaining and we see him on ESPN and the whole thing?
I think there's a little bit of both in the sense of if he loses, this is not going to be a career-defining moment where his career is just going to go down. He's still a big name. He can still hype up any fight out there. So it's not going to hurt his brand in that sense. But as far as, winning, I think it could elevate him because, look, he went in there and fought Anderson Silva. He went in there and fought John Jones. He went in there and fought Fedor Emelianenko. I think he's probably the only person that could say that's done that, has fought all the, greatest of all times, or at least, some of them. And to not only that, but he put himself in that situation, right? He put himself in the rematch against Anderson Silva. He put himself in the light heavyweight title shot against John Jones when nobody thought he would. And now, look, he's a middleweight fighting the heavyweight GOAT. I mean, this just speaks to how good he is on the mic and how he can position himself in any situation, no matter what.
And he's to his
credit,
has
speaks more to his legacy of his trash talk and his promotion, right? We kind of forget about him because, Connor's around and a few other guys that trash talk. But as far as MMA goes, he's the OG of trash talk.
He's the innovator. He's the innovator of trash talk. And also, he's won his way to this point, right? He did get into the tournament and he beat Rampage Jackson, who he was giving up quite a big amount of weight.
Yeah.
In general, Danny, this heavyweight Grand Prix, and it's a collection of interesting characters and some longtime heavyweights, some people who are past their prime, some middleweights and light heavyweights moving up. Are you buying into this tournament as a real sport in a sporting sense of elite fighters? Like, will it actually mean something for the winner? Of course, it'll mean something for the winner, but does it mean something as far as relevancy in MMA goes to who wins this tournament?
It does. I mean, and people, I know they've been bagging a little bit on it, but look, Rampage Jackson at heavyweight, would it be crazy to think that he wouldn't be a top 15 in the UFC? I mean, match him up with Stefan Struve, he's in the top 15, and I don't know who wins that fight, to be honest. So the winners same thing with Frank Mir. So they have legitimate wins, and this is a legitimate tournament. I would have liked to seen a little bit more heavyweights. King Mo maybe should have been in there. Ryan Bader, I mean, he is the champ. But yeah, it definitely means something. It is a tournament that I find, to be honest, very relevant.
Let's transition now to the co-main event of Bellator 207. It's also a relevant fight in the World Heavyweight Grand Prix because it's between Roy Nelson and Sergey Kharitonov, and Roy Nelson is kind of almost defending his alternate spot in the tournament. If something goes wrong, if someone can't make it, Roy Nelson can pull a Daniel Cormier, like when Cormier slipped into the Strikeforce Grand Prix a few years ago. How do you see that fight going? And Roy Nelson is a guy who also we've seen a lot of, and he can almost reinvent his career in this position as well.
So for Sergey, the paratrooper, his Bellator career, if you just seen his Bellator career, it hasn't gone the way he's probably planned. But this is an OG guy that's been around. He fought in Pride, Strikeforce, and he's in quite a streak because he fought outside Bellator. He's been fighting outside Bellator. I believe he fought for M1. So this is an important fight, and honestly, the winner here, especially more for Sergey, I think Roy Nelson, he's still very game, but I feel like a lot of fighters have already figured out his style. I feel like the winner here, if there's a spot, could very well become a contender to winning that belt for sure.
Also on the Bellator 207 card is a fight between Lorenz Larkin and Ian Pascu, which is a Bellator welterweight Grand Prix. It's an alternate fight, not a first round fight. That's also adds to that card, and also Baby Slice is on that card at Bellator 207 at Mohegan Sun on the main card. The Bellator 208 co-main event is a guy that we've seen a whole lot of, Benson Henderson against a Bellator veteran going back to 2013, Sayed Awad, who's been there even before the Coker regime. Benson Henderson is on a one-fight winning streak right now against Roger Huertas, coming off that win, but he was on a little bit of a skid before that, and it seems like his Bellator contract is coming to an end now, and he's trying to get that one last contract. Where do you see Benson Henderson at this point in his career?
This is a very interesting situation, and I'm always fascinated by this story, sort of like the Gray Maynard recently, like these guys that have a name, that fought for titles, but for some reason they just can't put together a streak, and Benson Henderson's a weird case because I know he's taken some damage throughout his career, but not extremely, like maybe like a Gray Maynard or a BJ Penn. He lives the life of a martial artist. He's all the time competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments. He's always in shape. So I just can't put together why is it that he's on a bit of a funk right now. But I think it's just I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's just one thing that he's got to change. And when he does, he can turn the corner. So this is a very important fight for him. Roger Huerta was sort of in that spot as well. So a win over him, I don't want to put too much stock into it, but I think Saad Awad is a perfect measurement of where he is, because this is a guy that has fought everybody, super experienced, on a streak, and a very game fighter. So if Benson Henderson manages to put a pretty convincing win, I think he's back in there. And as far as his Bellator future, I think he's still game. I just think he needs to figure out a couple of things, and he's back in there. And he's a big name. So
are you surprised that Awad is as big of an underdog as he is? I think plus 335 on some sports books.
335. I am. Saad Awad is a very game fighter. I think he's been around since Bjorn Rebney was doing the tournaments. He's a very good fighter, man. And
4-fight winning streak.
Yeah, 4-fight win streak. I think it should be a lot closer. But somewhere around that range, I would say I'll put him at a plus 200, plus 150 maybe.
Awad, of course, training down in Orange County, California with TJ Dillashaw, Cup Swanson at training lab, doing his strength and conditioning with the likes of Aaron Pico. So kind of a reinvention for him as well. Also on the Bellator 208 card is interesting fight between Henry Corrales and Andy Main, Czech Congo versus Timothy Johnson, and an all-Russian battle between Alexander Shlemenko, former Bellator middleweight champion, against Anatoly Tokov. I want to now ask you, Danny, I'm going to put you on the spot here for your predictions for these main and co-main fights. Let's start with the heavyweight Grand Prix. We'll start on Friday night. Bader Mitrione. What do you think?
I got Bader. Man, I'm telling you, I saw him in person. He's not a small heavyweight. Very big guy, very strong. I think this whole time it's been talking about the size difference. I think he's actually going to be stronger than Mitrione. Mitrione's going to be actually the fastest, lighter guy on the feet. But I think, again, when do you see heavyweights shoot doubles? Very, not too often. I think it's going to catch Matt Mitrione by surprise, and I think Bader will walk out with the win there. Yeah.
Chael Sonnen, Fedor Emelianenko.
Honestly, that one's so tough. As I said, like, I can't even picture them in the same cage. Dude, how do you even break that fight down? I'm gonna go with The Last Emperor. I just have a feeling, man. I don't know.
The Last Emperor over the American Gangster?
The American Gangster. I think anything goes in that one. I'm just in it to see what happens, right? But yeah, I think Fedor goes by.
Nelson Karatanov.
Karatanov. I think he's a bit more game. He can always get caught by one of those big hands, that Nelson throws. But when was
big
the last?
Hands, big belly.
Yeah, but when was the last time Nelson knocked out someone? I don't remember out of the top of my head. I think it's been quite a bit. I think he should be all right.
How about Henderson versus Awad?
That one's a really close one. I'm very high on Awad. Benson Henderson, but a former champ. He's got all the experience in the world. Again, I feel like it's just one thing that he's got to tweak, and he's back in there. So I'm going to go with Benson Henderson.
I think we're going to wrap this up from here, from Viacom headquarters in New York. Please stay tuned for all the pre- and post-fight coverage of Bellator 207 and Bellator 208. For Danny, I'm Marc. Stay posted at MMAfighting.com.